keeping you up to speed on all your Colorado teams. It's time for Coffee Break.
A happy Friday to you all. It is the Friday before the Pro Bowl. It's the first Friday before meaningful football action that we haven't had in a long time. The Nuggets and the Avs are feeling like they're in a little bit of a slump, but for different reasons. And I have some questions about who's got a tougher task to dig out of it. And does the NFL, who's come under fire recently for accusations of rigged games and slanted officiating and the like as we prepare for the Kansas City Chiefs Philadelphia Eagles Super Bowl, is there a new whistleblower in town who's trying to put their agenda out there? All things I want to discuss with my friend Will Petersen. Scrappy Will, how are you, man?
I'm good, Richie. Happy Friday to you. And it's finally the end of January.
I know.
Longest month ever.
Yeah, January felt like it might have had 61 days.
Exactly.
Will, I want to start with some comments that were made by the brother of a very prominent former NFL official, and that NFL official is current Fox Rules analyst, but former NFL senior VP of officiating, the man who ironically crafted the current replay and review system that the NFL implements. That is, of course, Dean Blandino.
Yep.
Well, Dean Blandino went on SiriusXM radio this past week and was asked about some comments regarding the nature that the NFL is rigged. We've heard all this controversy with the Chiefs and blah, blah, blah. And here's what Dean said. My brother, who is convinced that the league is rigged, that is convinced that I, Dean Blandino, signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement, when I left the league office, that I cannot tell anybody that it's rigged. I said, listen, there's no conspiracy. The officials, there's too many variables. There's too much going on. To me, it's the hardest sport. When you think about football, with 7 different officials to say, okay, I'm going to rig this game, or the game is rigged from the league office down, the officials are just trying to get it right. Will, I don't know if Dean Blandino and his brother, if someone didn't text someone happy birthday, or if somebody's wife is no longer on good terms with somebody's sister-in-law,
right,
or whatever it is, but to have your brother, if you're Dean Blandino, who's a prominent member of every Fox NFL broadcast that we see, who is a prominent member of the league's officiating governing body, and who, like I said, designed the current review and replay system, if his own brother is going out of his way to kind of spread this message to the point where Dean, it seems like he's trying to get in front of the horse a little bit with some of this stuff, I think all of it points to the very real fact, whether or not you want to keep your tinfoil hat on and say the NFL is rigged, there's a conspiracy, this, Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City, blah, blah, blah. The NFL very clearly has a perception problem as it relates to the integrity of their game in 2024 and beyond.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was floored that Dean brought this up publicly because, like you said, maybe he's just trying to get out in front of it. There's some bombshell coming from the brother or something, but Dean is almost pouring gasoline on a fire that I'm sure Roger Goodell is not real thrilled about, that Dean is bringing this up. The problem is we all just have Chiefs fatigue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it never got this bad with Brady and Belichick. What is it about Mahomes that is driving fans nuts? Well, I think it's the fact that you can see the clips of Tom Brady getting absolutely blown up and there's no flag.
Correct.
People always say, well, why didn't we feel this way about the Patriots? Because the NFL allowed hitting 20 years ago. They don't allow hitting of the quarterback anymore. And Mahomes, it seems like, always gets all the key calls. Throw in that he's really damn good, and it's a perfect formula of people just being frustrated, fatigued, and saying outrageous things like the league is rigged and Dean Blandino is signing NDAs.
Yeah, listen, I don't know about any of the stuff that Dean's brother is apparently spouting
it's
off.
Not
Although
rigged. It's not rigged.
I love the
it's
concept of a conspiracy theory, and I love a good whistleblower.
I do too.
But I tend to lean with you. I don't think that the NFL is quote-unquote rigged, but what I do think is that they have absolute incompetence and complacency at the officiating level that is also fueled by a complete lack of accountability from this massive body that helps govern the outcome of games. Officials have no accountability. You can't criticize officials if you're a head coach or a player without risk of being fined 5-figure plus amounts.
Mm-hmm.
You can't make an official stance as a team. Even though we saw D'Amico Ryans and several Will Anderson and several Texas players say, you know what, we're so floored about this, we don't even care. We've seen guys like, even in the AFC West, we saw Antonio Pierce, when the former head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders, say, hey, if they're going to keep officiating Mahomes this way, we're going to get our pound of flesh. I'm going to tell Max Crosby, take the penalty, take the fine, just take a piece of Mahomes with you on the way out. So we've seen teams, even with this, do it, but it's set up to prevent that. You get pool reports from certain officials, which is, to me, is just the most placating, check a box, whatever. You have a very veteran NFL or trusted friendly reporter asking questions, and they're not really even allowed to ask that many follow-ups. It kind of becomes like, you see press secretary press conferences or things like that, where they just start giving you the no comment over and over and over again. That's what we get. And that's their like check a box, like, no, see, we have accountability. It's not. And what I think it's causing is, and you can argue chicken or the egg here, but I think it's causing the overall product in the NFL to diminish at an increasingly rapid rate, because this has a trickle-down effect of, we know this is how the NFL is being officiated, poorly so. Therefore, we have to adjust how we game plan, how we coach, and how we as players play to prevent ourselves from hitting this ceiling over and over again. And what that leads to is situations where you can look back at. It's funny you mentioned Tom Brady, because I'm going to bring up some comments from him in a little bit. You can go back to Tom Brady in that era, Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, and you can watch quarterbacks just get absolutely blasted. And not just quarterbacks, wide receivers over to the middle of the field. We've made it so hard for defensive players to play defense because we've put the onus of player protection on one side of the ball, whose inherent job is to stop the other side of the ball. It's like fighting with your hands tied behind your back to a certain degree. And I think all of it culminates with just a poor NFL product that continues to evolve the less and less we do about it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I think my pushback would be, well, people are still watching. Like, the ratings are still absolutely through the roof. So what incentive does the league, Goodell, have to do anything about it unless the ratings start to suffer? The AFC Championship game did a monster number, something like 54 million viewers, the second most for a non-Super Bowl ever. I assume the Super Bowl is going to be where it always is, which is like 120, 130 million people that watch the game. I think until fans start tuning out, Roger Goodell doesn't care. We all wanted Bills-Lions, right? Like, that was the dream Super Bowl. And I told everyone on 104.3 The Fan 2 months ago, you know what? We're going to get stuck with Chiefs-Eagles. And what did we get? We got stuck with Chiefs-Eagles. I mean, find me the casual sports fan that's not going to watch this game. People can say on Facebook, I'm done, I'm not watching. Everyone watches the Super Bowl.
They did the same thing with the NBA and the bubble. They did the same thing with the NFL during the Colin Kaepernick drama and all of that. There is an element of the Coors Field conundrum here with the NFL. We all know that the Rockies stink. And we all know that they're not really going to do much to get better, because they still turn money hand over fist at 20th and Blake, because it's just a damn fun way to spend an afternoon in the summer. And I raise my hand every year as part of that problem. I get it. But so I'll agree with you there. But I mentioned those comments from Tom Brady. And this is, I think, maybe more of a frustrating realization, because Tom Brady's going to echo some of the sentiments that I brought up. Trey, go ahead and throw that graphic up on the screen there. He said, this was when in an interview on the Stephen A. Smith show, Stephen A. Smith's little side project. He said, quote, I think there's a lot of mediocrity in today's NFL. I don't see the excellence that I saw in the past. I think the coaching isn't as good as it was. I don't think the development of young players is as good as it was. The rules have allowed a lot of bad habits to get into the actual performance of the game. So I think that the product, in my opinion, is less than it ever has been. And he went on to say, look, a lot of players like Ray Lewis, Rodney Harrison, Ronnie Lott, guys that impacted the game in a certain way, you look at them and every hit that they made would have been a penalty in today's NFL. How are coaches complaining about their own players being tackled? Why don't they talk to the player about how to protect themselves? Offensive players, and this is the part I was mentioning, need to protect themselves. It's not up to the defensive player to protect an offensive player. A defensive player needs to protect himself. I didn't throw to certain areas of the field because I was afraid players were going to get knocked out. That's the reality. He went on to mention guys like Ray Lewis. You didn't throw over the middle of the field when Ray Lewis was lurking, because that guy, Ray Lewis, was going to knock your receiver out, and then you don't have him for the rest of the game. And I don't want to be the guy that goes a little get off my lawn and preaches about how good things used to be, because there is an element of player safety that I think is important. We don't want the rampant concussion issues and the long-term health ramifications. You know, we want to do our best as a society to prevent some of these people who play a gladiator sport from, by the time they turn 50, 55, 60, they're croaking or they can't stand up to play with their grandkids,
Sure.
or they have no mental capacity left. I'm not trying to be that guy, but what I am saying is that I think this is the real root of the NFL problem. Not that games are rigged, although, the NFL definitely has a right to call itself an entertainment business. I mean, it's no secret that Deshaun Watson's first game after all of his drama and departure from Houston when he goes to Cleveland, his first game back after a conspicuously timed 12-game suspension in a 16-game season is against his former team in Houston.
Right.
Or you see, the loser of a controversial game in the postseason of one year is the season opener the next year with a rematch of the same team. So I get it. They're also like a nonprofit organization, which cracks me up. They have all these tax exempt statuses and things like that. But I just think that this is almost like a misdirection that we're allowing ourselves to fall into, is that we're talking about the NFL being the WWE and it's all scripted and rigged and this and that. When what it really is we're basically just consciously allowing the product to get worse and worse and not doing anything about it.
Yeah, you're right. And what is the solution? Because this league preaches player safety all the time. And you look at Tom Brady talking about, well, back in my day, defenders blew guys up and I had to protect them. Richie, we all remember the hit Emmanuel Sanders took in St. Louis.
My gosh.
I was in the building that day, actually, a road game I traveled to with some friends. And it's one of the nastiest hits I've ever seen. Even that was 10 years ago. Can you imagine that now? If a hit like that happened, the league can't go back because then everyone's going to call, to quote James Merrillat, balderdash on the player safety stuff. So that's where, to me, it gets curious, is how do they improve it while also committing to safety, even though we all know they're not committed to safety. They're sort of in a rock and a hard place.
The sad thing is you don't even have to go back to the days of Emmanuel Sanders in Super Bowl 48 or the Tom Brady era, where he, was tackled in week 1 and kind of got crunched and tore his ACL. And that was really what I think is the true genesis point of the overcorrection of quarterback safety, was that year when they lost Brady, who was kind of killing the league.
Yeah, that was probably 2009, I want to say.
Yeah. You don't have to go back that far. You can go back and look at the divisional round of this NFL playoffs and watch guys like Jared Goff and Jalen Hurts and Jaden Daniels get absolutely crunched in 2024/2025. But Mahomes gets a 15-yard penalty in a crucial situation for 2 Houston Texans players hitting each other on top of him.
It's a different standard for a different quarterback. That's what you're getting at.
It is. And this isn't an uncommon thing. We see it in the NBA. We get the superstar whistle, you know what I mean? And things like that. And so I'm not even necessarily faulting the NFL for wanting to have some form of protection or favoritism toward the player that carries their bacon, for lack of a better expression. It's just we've gone so far in the opposite direction, and I'm not sure what the solution is. Just like I'm not 100% sure what the solution, if there even maybe needs to be one, which is going to be the question I pose to you, as to how we see the Nuggets and the Avalanche kind of shake themselves out of this little funk here. And so I wanted to ask you, Will, as it relates to the ever so common panic meter, right? We're at the midway point of the season, trade deadline approaching for both teams, one a little bit faster than the other, and some significant moves with the Avalanche that have preceded that. And I know you've been very vocal about some of those moves. Whose panic meter should be higher, the Nuggets or the Avalanche, the way that both teams sit right now at this point of the season with the dynamics at play?
I don't know. Can they both be at a 9? I mean,
yes, that is true.
You're making me answer. You know what I will say? I think the Avs are at about a 9. I actually think the Nuggets are at an 8. Okay. I think my panic meter is higher for the Avalanche because they just traded a top 10 player on planet Earth, guy who's gotten back-to-back 100-point seasons, 55 goals 2 years ago, for a guy, Martin Necas, who's had 3 really good months in Carolina. I'm not discounting those 3 really good months, but Mikko did it here for a decade. And to just assume that, Necas is going to get the McKinnon bump because he's now on a line with him, I'm going to hold and wait and see how that happens. I think the Avalanche had a real chance to win the Stanley Cup this year, Richie. And unless Mackenzie Blackwood gets insanely hot in the playoffs, I'm not so sure this isn't a team that's staring a first-round exit right in the face. So my meter is higher for the Avalanche. I thought they had a chance to win a cup when we sat here last Friday, and now I don't think they do.
I agree with the sentiment there. I think some of the early returns on Martin Necas have been better a little bit than I expected. He has 4 assists in 3 games. In the first couple of games watching him, he he really pops to me when he's on the ice. He's fast, and you can see that there's potential for him to slide into that top six and really make an impact. And I think maybe you could see him slide in once Val comes back. You know, he could be a potential replacement for Casey Middlestat as your 2C and really kind of bolster that top two lines, which again is the reason they traded Mikko in the first place. Other than the fact that I don't think they just wanted to pay him what he's worth, what he thinks he's worth, or his camp thinks he's worth. And I think things were trending in the direction of potentially working out in that favor for the Avalanche. His market value seemed to be trickling a lot closer to like 10.5 compared to the 13-14 that it was reported his camp is searching for to match Leon Draisaitl. But now with the reports coming out that the NHL salary cap is going to jump up dramatically more than we thought. First, it was like 92 for the 2025-2026 season. Now it's looking more like 96 with incremental increases closer and closer to 100 million over the next 3 seasons. I think that alone is going to provide a team enough opportunity to pay Mikko the 13, ish million that he wants, even if that's not truly what he's worth, dollars to donuts.
Yeah, you mentioned that real quick. You mentioned the cap going up. Doesn't this make the Chris McFarland panic move on January 24th look even worse? I mean, again, with this information, he could have paid Mikko Rantanen, and that's what I've been hammering and what I want to make my message clear. Like you said, I've been vocal about it. I'm not that upset about the trade, okay, guys? I'm upset about the timing of the trade. If it had been done on March 6th or March 7th, I guess I would have understood. I don't get having it done on January 24th, and then on January 31st, we learn, they actually could have paid Mikko Rantanen because, like you mentioned, the cap is going up tremendously.
Yeah, and it's going to be something that we'll have to play out. I think that you can't operate when you're in Chris McFarland's shoes. You can't necessarily always operate with the benefit of hindsight and hypothetical like we get to do in these cushy leather chairs sometimes.
No, but he legitimately had 6 weeks and he panicked.
Yeah, but is there not a risk of diminishing returns when you push something right up to a deadline and a team no longer has to worry because they know that if you don't trade him and he's an unrestricted free agent in the offseason, they can potentially just sign him for the money they would have to pay him if they traded for him and woo him without giving up players or draft capital assets in the first place.
They didn't get some overwhelming haul, though. Like on Friday night, I guarantee you were Googling Martin Necas and Jack Drury. If they've gotten a household name, okay, I buy that. But if we're sitting here acting like, well, he had to do it on 24th because he just got this massive package in return. He didn't even get a very good package in return.
Yeah, and like I said, I think that we're going to have to see. I think Jack Drury, who's already, put himself on the scoreboard a couple of times. And
he has 2 goals, but he had 3 before that. Like this guy's not some goal-scoring machine.
For a third-line player that you acquire in a trade to make a little snappy impact like that on a line where you're not
playing
really
the parade because Jack Drury is here.
Well, I'll tell you this. I do think you're going to see Martin Necas, his production. And mind you, this was a guy that was leading the NHL in points at the start of January or mid-December, ahead of Mikko Rantanen, Necas. So now he
had a good couple months. He had 52 points last year. Mikko had 105. Mikko doubled him up.
I got it. But what I'm saying is, I think that you're going to get a boost in production from Martin Necas playing alongside Nathan MacKinnon the same way we see, just like every player plays their best basketball alongside Nikola Jokic. I think Martin Necas playing alongside Nathan MacKinnon and a healthy Val Nichushkin, or even if he slides into that second line, I think that he is going to be somebody that sees a bump in production. The degree of which remains to be seen. Is it high enough to justify trading a perennial 100-point scorer? Does it work out in hindsight? Is Mikko going to go win a cup with the Carolina Hurricanes now as they are kind of pushing all their chips into the center of the table? Maybe. I don't know. But I will tell you this. You mentioned you thought that the Avs could win a cup, and now you're concerned whether or not they can make it out of the first round.
Yep.
Right? I have that exact same concern with the Denver Nuggets, not because of moves that they made, but if this Denver Nuggets team cannot play better defense on a night-to-night basis than what we've seen in the last handful of games, I don't know that there's a team in the Western Conference playoff bracket that can't beat them.
It's a good point for sure, because with the Nuggets, defense is effort, right, Richie? Mm-hmm. And right now it feels like an effort problem. Now, the only thing I will say is, it's mid-January. It's an 82-game slog. Well, it's late January. It's late January. It's an 82-game slog. And this road trip isn't off to a good start. But what were the vibes around the Nuggets before this road trip? They were sky high. They had played really well. They were 12-1 in the last 13 games Nikola Jokic had played in. Remember, he missed those 2 games, one for being sick, one for the elbow, both losses. But I'm not going to look at 3 bad games on a road trip and go, oh my gosh, the sky is falling. I'm still at an 8 because of these 3 games. Because guess what? Nikola Jokic, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., Jamal Murray, Christian Brown, Russell Westbrook, they all still play for the Denver Nuggets. Mikko Rantanen does not play for the Colorado Avalanche anymore. That's why my panic meter is higher for the Avs than the Nuggets. But you're right. Defense on this road trip has been non-existent, and it's been super concerning because it's so much. It's so funny how much changes in a week. When we sat here a week ago, vibes were high with the Nuggets, and now they go and have these duds in Minnesota, Chicago, and New York, and we're like, yeah.
Well, see, and here's the thing is I think that you look at two of those three teams you just mentioned, Minnesota, Chicago, New York. Two of those three teams are, I think the Knicks might be a top, 3-4 team in the NBA.
They can win the East.
Yeah.
I'm not sold on the Cavs. The Celtics, they're good, but they seem to choke in the playoffs more often than not. Last year, notwithstanding, like the Knicks could absolutely be in the NBA Finals. I agree with you. Yeah.
So Minnesota, the team that eliminated them last year
in the NBA Finals if they get hot.
An embarrassing game 7 setting. The Chicago Bulls are not a great team.
No, that was a bad loss. That was a bad loss.
It's a bad loss. But here's why, and I agree with you. I think that both of them should be like the 7.5, 8 should be the floor for both of these teams as it relates to a panic meter, just for different reasons. If I was to attempt to argue for an edge over the Nuggets, over the Avalanche, it's that the Avalanche just made a big move, okay? And it's going to take some time to reset and reevaluate things and try to push forward along this back half of a slog of a season, just like the NHL is compared to the NBA. But the Nuggets didn't do that, and in theory, they should be getting a little bit of a boost. Aaron Gordon comes back into the starting lineup, a lot of drama associated with that I might want to get some of your thoughts on, as Christian Brown, not Russell Westbrook, slides back down to the bench after being a starter for the majority of this season. The Nuggets have shown, in my opinion, a propensity to not rise, but wilt when they play against truly high-level NBA competition. During that 12, 13, 15 game stretch, they played a lot of, subpar teams. They and I think the Nuggets have proven, even when they're not at their best, the talent level of Nikola Jokic and the opportunities he provides the Nuggets allows them to essentially beat up on somewhat lesser or middle of the road teams. They're always going to have that capability, loss against Chicago withstanding. But it seems like whenever they're pressed against the top tier cream of the crop in the West or just in the NBA in general, they wilt, and they especially wilt on the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, they've been pretty good.
Yeah.
Even against good teams, they mostly figure it out as long as they can keep their 3-point percentage respectable at that level. But defensively, Oklahoma City runs circles around them. Minnesota bullies them across the sandbox. The New York Knicks, I cannot believe it felt like every single time I took my eyes off the screen, I hear out of the corner of my ear, OG Anunoby for the slam.
Yeah.
It was like, and they looked like how I feel like the Nuggets looked during their title run. That is how I felt watching the Knicks in that last game that they played. They were so fluid. They moved the ball quick. The Nuggets, who traditionally speaking are a great team with transition scoring, and they always kind of have been with Nikola Jokic because of his ability as a distributor, they got played the way the Nuggets used to play teams. And that's concerning to me.
Totally. I think you make all fair points there. And the other element I'll add to this is 2 of those 3 games were on national TV, and the Nuggets laid absolute eggs on ABC against Minnesota and ESPN against the Knicks. Nikola Jokic got in early foul trouble. Malone sat him for 15 minutes, didn't challenge the second foul call. I thought that was a mistake on Malone's part as well. But as Nuggets fans, because Nug life, like we've all lived with Nug life our whole entire existence, we still worry about narratives, and national narratives are not real kind to the Nuggets right now. And they did themselves no favors that those eggs were laid on national TV. Jokic loves having 42, 19, and 17 on a Tuesday night against the Wizards that no one can watch. Would love for him to have those kind of games when it's on ABC and ESPN. It doesn't seem like it's happening, at least not this season. And I get it. Like, people are going to say, don't be a teenager. Don't be dramatic. Don't care so much what other people think about you. I still care what other people think about the Nuggets. And the fact these games happened on these big national stages just bums me out, because it's going to give SGA the MVP, and it's going to have a lot of talking heads calling the Nuggets pretenders, not contenders.
And I think that to a certain degree, if you stumble and fall when given the opportunities to step up and challenge, that is a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You kind of become what you've shown that you are when the spotlight has been put on you. As it relates to the starting lineup, Will, fair or foul, Aaron Gordon, who's like a $90+ million extension player on a championship level roster, when he is healthy. He needs to be in the starting lineup. Fair or foul?
That's fair. That's fair. I think Michael Malone benched the wrong guy, though. What frustrated me the most, Richie, is Christian Brown's coming off a game against the Bulls when he scores 28.
Career high.
He's either the Nuggets' best or second best defender. He has overachieved our wildest dreams in replacing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. What kind of message does that send to the kid? And I don't even call him a kid disrespectfully. He's in his third year in the NBA. He's a champion. What kind of message does that send to him? Does it send to the room? Listen, I told James Merrillat this last night on Denver Sports Tonight. We all want to get jobs based on our qualifications, not based on our age. This felt like a seniority problem from Michael Malone. And I'm just going to be honest. I'll say the name and it makes everyone uncomfortable. Should have benched Jamal Murray. Start Russ at the 1, start CB at the 2, MPJ at the 3, Aaron at the 4, and Nikola at the 5. That's what Malone should have did, but Malone's scared of Jamal Murray, and that's why Christian Brown was the odd man out.
Interesting. Well, I'll agree with you on a couple of things. One, I do believe that Christian Brown, who's being thrust into a starting role in the NBA early on in his career, tasked with the job of replacing one of the key members of a championship roster, and he was, in my opinion, the literal determining factor for Calvin Booth and company about whether or not to bring him back is that we think we can replicate or exceed KCP's production with Christian Brown.
And he's done it.
And he's, by and large, he's done it. Has he had some moments, some slip-ups? I think it took him a little bit of an adjustment period on the defensive side of the ball. I think teams were kind of screening him to death and hitting him through that pick and roll and putting him in a spin cycle a little bit. But I think he's figured that out by and large for the most part. And I think that his shooting and scoring has improved just to the point where you said he got a career high in points before getting benched. And that's
28's a lot of points for Christian Brown.
Correct.
Yes.
Correct. He scores a career high in points. He's contributing well on both sides of the ball. And his reward from that, from Michael Malone, is, hey, thanks for the gumball, Mickey. Go back and sit down on the bench. I do believe, even if he's basically saying genuinely or disingenuously, in Aaron Gordon's perspective, that Aaron Gordon is willing to come off the bench and do whatever he's. Again, there's a part of me that if that was kind of what was being floated out there, I could see Aaron Gordon saying that, because I have always labeled Aaron Gordon as one of the last true hard hat and lunch pail guys in the NBA that will just show up, do whatever he's asked of him, whatever's best for the team, sacrifice self for the greater good.
Totally agree.
And that's part of what's made him such a glue guy
on
AG. This Nuggets course.
Because he came from Orlando, accepted his role, and next thing you know, he's running through the streets with Nuggets fans as a champion.
Jokic is the best basketball player in the world, and he will go down as the best Nuggets player in history, and that may never be topped.
It will never change.
I don't think so.
Not during
either.
our lives.
But no. Aaron Gordon, dollar to donut, will go down as my favorite Nugget of all time. So I agree. I do. I love Aaron Gordon.
No, I'm not saying you're wrong. It's just there's been a lot of Nuggets over the years. Your favorite ever.
I
okay.
Agree. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I love him. And so I agree that, and especially come postseason time, Aaron Gordon's not coming off the bench, right? So it makes sense to put him back into the starting lineup. But I said yesterday, and I was given some pushback by our listeners here and others on social media, that I think Christian Brown got done a little dirty.
I do too.
In this situation. And it's and there are people who said we don't owe Christian, the collective fans speaking on part of the team. I'm guilty of it sometimes as well. We don't owe Christian Brown anything. And he's a net positive coming off the bench because you're getting starter level production off of a bench unit. We got to survive the non-Jokic minutes, blah, blah, blah. I got it. My question to you, Will, is who do you think is more likely to be in the starting rotation come postseason time? Russell Westbrook or Christian Brown starting in place of KCP?
Westbrook. I think Malone tipped his hand on Wednesday night.
Do you think that's wise, though? Because we've seen the Russell Westbrook experience look one way in the regular season with the previous 5 teams he's been on the last 5 or 6 years, and then it melts in the playoffs. So we've seen that happen.
But you didn't ask me if I thought it was wise. You asked me what I think it's going to be.
That's right.
What I think it's going to be is the lineup we saw in New York. And I think that'll be a mistake ultimately.
I do too. And that's my point, is that I think that while with the same things we said about Christian Brown, that he has exceeded a lot of expectations and what he's been asked to do, he's done it. I actually think you could make that same exact argument in a lot of ways for Russell Westbrook. This is a guy that was brought in on like a vet minimum contract to be the leader of the bench, and we've gotten legitimate starting minutes and positive team impact from him being in the starting lineup alongside Jamal Murray and company. But
he's been even better when Jamal was hurt, though.
Right.
That's why I said he should bench Jamal.
And for all the love and due respect that the Jamal Murray, Nikola Jokic 2-man game has been given, the 2-man game between Russ and Jokic doesn't look too bad either.
Been great. Malone called it the best in the NBA the other night.
So I think that knowing that we've seen the Russell Westbrook experiment with these other teams before and the significant drop-off that we've seen in the postseason when teams aren't game planning for the second night of a back-to-back on a roadie, and you get to say, hey, we're going to play this team for minimum four straight games, and we can really start to exploit and expose some weaknesses, that's proven to be a defect for Russell Westbrook. So I would think that Russell Westbrook, who was brought in to be the leader of the bench unit, in a situation where you're bringing Aaron Gordon back, it is not that big of a deal or a slight or illogical to put him back and leave Christian Braun where we've seen him produce well. Yeah. That's my take on it.
No, I get it. My Jamal theory is probably a little more explosive. Yours is probably a little more rational. But I do think we both agree that Brown shouldn't have gone to the bench. It should have been Westbrook, should have been Jamal. Be curious to see what the lineup is tonight in Philly. We get the game here in about 5 hours.
Well, you know Embiid's not going to be in it.
No, he won't be there, but I'm curious about the Nuggets starting five tonight for sure.
Another topic of somewhat contention, or definitely conversation on the way out here, Will, as we are on the Friday before the Pro Bowl, was that we saw with the elevation of the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles to the Super Bowl, we had to officially call on alternates to be able to play to replace the starting players from those teams. And both Quinn Miners as a first alternate and Bo Nix as a fourth alternate were called upon, and both declined. I think you could argue for two different reasons, because Bo's, it was definitely phrased as a medical reason. He's got a previously scheduled routine, regular, minor cleanup procedure, whatever amount of like I was
gonna say Mike Kliss is my guy. I love Mike, but Mike carefully worded that tweet to not incite any panic.
I'm sure, just like he asked us all for help with adjectives about how bad last season was with Russell Wilson, I'm sure he asked plenty of help for adjectives on how many things can we qualify this Bo Nix scope, or whatever it may be.
To not make anyone panic. Yes.
So with Quinn Miners, it didn't seem to be that element. And my
Quinn
question
was just snubbed. Quinn was just mad. Quinn did it in anger.
My question to you was, do you think that was a wise decision for both of those guys, factoring in that we have a lot of conversations now about how much the Pro Bowl really matters?
Yeah, no, I'm not going to get fired up about it. I know our guy James Marilat and Brandon Stokely, they're all mad about it, whatever. First of all, Bo, I think it's a mature decision. He's taking care of himself and his health, and ultimately that'll help the franchise. And with Quinn, yeah, I get it, man. You were a first team AP All-Pro, but not a Pro Bowler. That doesn't make any sense. AP All-Pro is harder to achieve than the Pro Bowler. I don't mind Quinn being a little bitter and a little petty, and I certainly don't mind Bo taking care of his body. To answer your question, Richie, no, I'm not going to get outraged about both these guys skipping the Pro Bowl.
And maybe outraged isn't the right word.
I think Maryland was outraged.
Well, he's outraged about everything. But I don't know that outrage is the right word. I might use... disappointed sounds kind of biting too.
Yeah. But why would you be disappointed?
Because, Will, I do think that there is an element, and I heard James Palmer articulate this with our guys in the morning a little bit better than I was in my head when I was reading these headlines.
Was he on this morning with those guys?
He was.
I'll have to check it out.
He was. And he flat out said with zero hesitation, oh, if I was Bo Nix, I would have gone. I would have gone. And the reason is because we all know that the Pro Bowl as a showcase is kind of a joke now. Like it's not a game, it's a skills competition. And even when it was a game, it sucked. It was the worst of the four major.
Sort of flag football game now.
Yeah, but whatever. I mean, like, you know what I'm saying? And so even when it was a true football game and not flag, it sucked. It was the worst of the four major all-star games, in my opinion.
Which is saying something. Because they're all pretty brutal.
Right.
Other than baseball.
Baseball I enjoy. And baseball, I think, shows you the biggest disparity amongst the two sides of the ball in the sport, where you see in the All-Star game how much better pitching is.
Oh, yeah. Every game's like 2-1.
The best pitchers in the league are so much better than the most elite hitters in the league that it's sickening. So anyways, but as it relates to the Pro Bowl, I'm not saying that it means as much as it used to for the players in the 90s and even the early 2000s and things of that nature. And you can argue the voting process. But 15 years from now, Will, if Bo Nix had accepted the Pro Bowl designation, no one's going to be like, well, wasn't he an alternate that year? He was a X-time. This is, by the way, the reason Russell Wilson accepted the invitation.
To booster his resume.
Because his resume 10 years from now, he was a 12-time Pro Bowler. Not he accepted as a 7th alternate in 2024.
That's very Russ. That's very Russ.
So, exactly. So But it's not even about the accolade perspective. I think, and James Palmer articulated this as someone who's been there and who's talked to the guys who've gone and witnessed it, there is a real, despite the lack of competitive nature that exists now, there's a real camaraderie aspect. One, amongst your fellow teammates who get selected, you become a representative of your franchise on that level where you're bringing the best of the best together. So we could have had 5, plus Broncos.
Yeah, Broncos still have 3 there, but I see your point.
We could have had 5 there, and it's like, wow, that's a lot of orange and blue at the Pro Bowl. But 2, just like we see in the offseason, we see that these tight end summits, and Von Miller was the king of the pass rush summit for so long. These guys who don't really ever get to do this kind of thing in the regular season because they're all on their own tracks and their own schedules, and it's all this and that, they get to come together. And it is like an element of the meeting of the minds, at least according to James Palmer, where they talk to each other, they feed off of each other, they compare things back and forth. And for a guy like Bo Nix, who overperformed what I think expectations certainly were in his rookie year in the NFL, is now going to be beholden to keeping that pace. I think this could have been a pretty good opportunity for him to sit next to the likes of a Joe Burrow or whoever, and learn and grow. And there's no reason that said that Quinn Miners couldn't have done the same thing. Is it the biggest impact or deal in the world? No. But I do think with all the predicating qualifiers that Mike Kliss, who we all love, Mike's our guy, put out there in his article about how not a big deal. Well, if it's not that big of a deal, push it another week. It's not like Bo Nix has to wait in line in the queue with Kaiser Permanente to make sure he gets a doctor slot.
Well, he was also in Cabo with the boys, and we saw the video of him and Zach Wilson and Jarrett Stidham and Mike McGlinchey. So if it was super serious, you're not going to Cabo. You're getting it done the day or two after the Bills game. I see your points. You're making sense to me. You are, but let's just hope Bo Nix is a 10-time Pro Bowler when it's all said and done. And the 11th one he could have gotten this year isn't really on anyone's radar.
Well, that's certainly the hope, and we will see. We'll get to see how all the players, including our beloved Russell Wilson, do as they run around in shorts and throw footballs at nets and, yada, 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 play tug of war.
Yeah, I won't be watching the Pro Bowl, but I hope you enjoy it, Richie.
Yeah, so I think there's probably better things we could all be watching. But I digress. Will, always a pleasure chatting with you. Appreciate your insight each and every week. We'll check out everything you got coming up at denversports.com. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Denver Sports 104.3 The Fan. So much great content from the likes of Will and others available to you at your fingertips 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We'll catch you all on Monday.